I think our teachers were really emphasizing that they do reach out to the parents. And I think for the most part, our teachers are doing that. And trying to figure out what their needs are, what is it that we can do. And we did that right from the very beginning. And I know parents loved it. They hadn't heard from the school for about 3 weeks. And so as we started that process, they go, wow, thanks for, it was hard. I mean, each call was probably 20 minutes long. Teachers said it took, a couple of days for them to get through all their parents. And so I think just trying to meet their needs, whether it's food, whether it was technology, whatever it is, they spent time listening. And so I think, and we've tried to continue that at least once a week, if not twice a week, especially with our parents who are struggling with their kids at this time, and trying to meet some of their needs.
Andrew, same question to you.
Yeah, I would echo what Mike said. I would say that the communication between teacher and parent is 10 times what it would normally be. We've even had parents say, hey, we're getting too much communication. We're getting too much direction. We need to kind of throttle back a little bit. So that was kind of humorous that we got that. But same with teachers and administrators. We are in contact a lot more because we have to. So, I always say there's lemons thrown your way and you make lemonade out of it. I think our technology is going to be even better next year. Our communication, we've seen where we had gaps in it. We're closing that. And I think parents are starting to understand that whether they like it or not, technology is part of the modern economy, and they need to take that seriously. Some of them hadn't. So I think there's a lot of benefits of that. I only want to do this once. But there is good things that have come out of it, a lot more communication. And as far as the mental health, as you know, we monitor kids anyway, and so not to get any FERPA guidelines there, we work with all of them all the time. So that really hasn't changed.
And I think just for those that are on the phone call with us that may not be able to see the chat function, there was an additional question that came through that I'm going to just kind of merge two of these questions in there and go to Andrew's conversation of the modified opening. I'm assuming that wearing masks may have something to do with that modification, and what happens if the parents choose to not make their kids wear a mask. And then the other question was, you guys are going too fast for me. I'm losing my places. I think they were talking about to reduce risk of sick kids in school. Do you think that modification would require taking temperatures of students before they enter the buildings? Michelle, we'll let you start with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Mike and Andrew and I were on a webinar Zoom this morning about exactly that, the health, the mask, and the data around temperature checks, shields versus face masks, and all different types of mask questions. And I think those are still being worked out. But as a parent, that would be helpful information on a survey that both Andrew has sent out. I know Mike's probably working on one, and we'll be sending one out on Friday to families. Is what does that look like if we do return full-time? What would be some of the things that parents are concerned about that we have to address? And the mask is right now what the guidance is for all of us. So if we come back in a phased plan where it's partial of enrollment back or it's all kids back, the center of that conversation is around mask wearing. In regards to temperature checks, part of it is by the time they hit your office, they already have a temperature. Then what do? How do you ask the family to come get the kid and bring the kid? Who brings the student home? They've already been on the bus. So there's lots of conversations about even what type of thermometer, because as you know, different thermometers, if a kid's been outside in the winter and they have their temperature taken on a bus, then that's going to impact the result of the temperature actually. So it's very interesting and actually scientific about the debates around types of masks, how often, who wears them, and how do you enforce those, as well as temperature checks. So as you know, these are all very sensitive questions with no real clarity on an answer other than guidance right now. So we'll have to work through those as we move forward in making a recommendation to return.
I would add to that because we just had a conversation, especially the elementary kids, socially, a masked person, you're going to have to start training them differently, because a masked person usually is of a villain or of a bad person. So it's like, it's just so hard from an emotional standpoint, teaching those young kids. And I mean, just expecting a 5 to 8 year old. I mean, I have an 11-year-old, and it was like, we went to the eye appointment and I couldn't have him put his mask on for 15 minutes because he was touching it and he was moving it around. And, you know, so I couldn't even imagine in a school setting having to deal with that, especially as a teacher. It would be very concerning for sure. But I am seeing a lot of things. Let's just move to the next question real quick, and then we'll try to get those questions in there. And just a mindset, we usually leave about 50 minutes for this call, and then last minute, 10-minute kind of follow-up stuff on the chat. So just so you know what the timeline is for both the panelists and the participants. Gemma?
All right, so our next question in regards to next year, how will clubs and other gatherings and or staying in touch with students change? So we'll let Mike go first on this one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember reading that one and trying to think, you know, how would that change? I mean, I think as far as the communication goes, I mean, I think one thing that we've learned through this is that we can communicate quickly and remotely with a group of people, and we can have meetings. And so, I mean, so one of those, and that can be really good in the event of say conferences and workshops. It's like we've had those remotely and say, you know, I kind of like that. It's not a bad thing. And so will we do that with students, with groups of students? Maybe with our high school students, yes. I think that's something that we can do if we need to. Obviously, the face-to-face, small groups of people together, that's ideal. That's what we want. That's the relationship building that's so critical in education. And so that's what we would opt for. That's what we want. Is it good for our teachers and for our students to be using you know, technology for learning? Yeah, you bet. And so is that something that we can, when we go back fully, can we still use that? I think so. I think it could be a real asset. It could be a real help for us. And so I don't think it's like, okay, great, we can throw all this out now and get back to the way it was. Yeah, I don't think so. I think we can still use it to enhance learning, just in a different way, that it's not mandatory and every day, all day.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. There's lots of ways in which kids can gather. I think the bigger question is, if we're talking about clubs, sports right now is even a bigger topic, probably with much more skin in the game, I guess, for lots of families in the community. So we don't even have a clear direction on what sports look like, and everything's on the table right now for that. I think our club guidance or activities beyond the school day will follow a lot of what we decide upon for sports or large gatherings for students. But again, I think it's easier for clubs to participate in a variety of options, sports less so. It's hard to do a Zoom for a track meet if you're not running. So I think, again, we have to have lots of plans in place. If somebody tests positive and it spreads quickly, we have to have those plans in place to hit pause and isolate, as well as keep social distancing. So I don't think any of us have any clear answers, but it's all things that we are continuing to have dialogue over.
Thank you. Andrew, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we've already started morphing all of our clubs into virtual. So our track coach this spring did virtual track, and it went very well. So our athletic director is going to switch all sports to esports or virtual. Chess club will continue. We don't really see an impediment in a small school. The important thing is that kids need to feel like they belong. And so I told all the club advisors and the coaches, just give me a plan on how you're going to flip this into virtual, and we'll pay you, because I want those kids to feel engaged. So yeah, I think in larger districts it might be a little problematic, but we've already flipped 2 of them into virtual and went really well.
Well, kudos to you guys for doing that so quickly. I've been watching one of my friends that's a long distance runner, like a cross country runner, and I'm seeing all of these virtual 5Ks, 25Ks, and she's going to do her 100K this weekend. So I've been watching how that happens. So who thought it was crazy for Olympic Games for esports and internet-based products? You never know. I think there was one question I thought was important in the chat function is, and this might be a question that's on the list, but what is the state doing to offer financial assistance with all of these differences and changes that you're having to do to your curriculum and moving forward? Andrew?
Well, that's a good question. You know, the CARES Act was not equitable. I don't know if you guys know that. So they decided to use the Title I platform, which sounded good in theory because it's already there. But to give you an idea, some districts got 30 cents on the dollar compared to other districts. So a lot of districts in the state of Washington, anticipating that we would get reimbursal, we spent $1, we got 30 cents. So, you know, we don't have a lot of faith going forward that our efforts will be reimbursed now. So I have to say, maybe Michelle and Mike had a difference, but we compared ourselves to other districts and we got about 30 cents on the dollar.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're experiencing some of the same thing, but you know, we are hearing some things, I guess, and I know that our governor and our state superintendent have taken some surveys as to what our technology needs are and maybe what some of our health supply needs are, and so we're thinking that there is going to be some funds available for that. We did hear today that our ESD 105 in Yakima does have masks for all of our employees. I mean, at least 3 per employee. So that'd be like 300 masks for us, which that's helpful. I mean, so that where that came from, I'm not sure, but I know that there are some groups out there at the state level that are trying to work towards making sure that all kids, all families have internet, and you know that there's going to be funds for that. There has been some reduced costs for that. There's some companies that stepped up and have helped out, and so yeah, I mean, we see that there may be some things that are coming, and we're hopeful.
Michelle, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the same thing. There's lots of mention. Maybe many of you have heard about the CARES Act and schools will be refunded. But again, it comes back to what Andrew's saying. It's a scale similar to how state funding works right now. I'm not placing a lot of hope or leaning on anything. If we get it, it's a bonus, but I'm not counting on it. My worry is the mask. Even though we're getting some masks, we did an inventory. My nurse and I sat down the other day and said, if we were 1 month even and every student had a mask, you know, I'm seeing some of you on the chat right now with kindergartners. Can you imagine kindergartners and preschoolers, and then they put the mask down and then somebody else picks it up. Now you have to throw away both masks. And so even just the cost of a mask every day for every single student, that adds up, right? So that's over 1,000 masks a day just for us. So there's lots of conversations about cost and who pays for that. And is that part of our budget? I think the technology is great, getting support, but I have to say, getting those Wi-Fi hotspots were extremely expensive and really hard to get a hold of. So when this hit, we called anybody and everybody. I think I have 10 hotspots from Vashon Island School District. I mean, we went everywhere looking for hotspots, but a huge thanks to our community. Again, I think when it comes to fiscal, our communities unfortunately are the ones that support schools. We don't get a lot of that funding that we need to properly fund education. So lots of thanks to our community support in terms of levies, but also in terms of, we had businesses that allowed us, our families, to log on to their Wi-Fi for free. So we were able to do Wi-Fi hotspots in and around our community so kids could drive up. And I tell you, one student, 4.0 kid, had to work all day long to help implement supplement income to his family, drove out to the Teanaway Grange every night to do his work online with free Wi-Fi, in generous support and thanks to the Grange. So we're relying on a lot of businesses to help support some of these things.
Wonderful. I also saw in the chat, and I kind of want to focus on clearing those chat questions real quick before we move to the next one. Sorry, Gemma, to jump in, but I liked Alejandra's question about how is your communication, contact, homework, etc., between schools and families that maybe speak little or no English. And then I'm going to add into that, if we have modified plans, how does a dual working family, how's that going to work? Is there going to be like after school programs, childcare opening up? What are your thoughts on that? And whoever wants to start first, go.
Well, we did have, I'll start. We do have two employees who are bilingual and have strong connections with our second language families. And so they were critical in communicating. We have one of our employees is at the high school and one is at the elementary. And so keeping in touch with those families, what their needs are, whether it be food, whether it be medical attention, whatever it is, and of course the educational needs, and trying to keep them up to date as best they could. And so that, I think we felt that was successful. And being a small school district, we could have two employees that would just focus on that and those families. The second question being, the schedule.
Yeah, after school or extra childcare.
Man, I know. I mean, that's one of the things we're really wrestling with. How do we do that? Okay, if it's remote learning or if it is a staggered schedule, how do schools manage that? How do families manage that? And we know. I mean, we heard from our state superintendent last week that in order for us to get parents back to work, we've got to get kids back to school. And so that I'm hoping that doesn't happen here in Kittitas County. I'm hoping we don't have to deal with staggered schedules. If so, we will. I mean, we have done daycare. We've been doing daycare since the beginning, just for 10 students. Would we have to expand that? Maybe. I mean, that's a road we would have to go down and take a look at. And is that something that we could provide? But we're hoping for a full opening. And if that means, and I know I've been reading some of the chat too about masks, and that could be a nightmare, but if that's what it takes, if it is mandated, I don't know that it would be. In our community now, it's optional, right, to wear a mask, but in schools, that could be a different thing. Yeah, that could be a nightmare for a 6, 7, 8-year-old, even for a 15-year-old for that matter, right, or for teachers. But if that's what it takes for us to get back to school fully, are we willing to put up with that? Are we willing to do that? And I guess that's what we need to hear from our parents on. But all the presentations and everything that I've heard, and I heard it again in an hour presentation this morning, is that masks do work. And if we want to keep that virus down, that's one thing that we're going to have to do. And where in places where masks are not being worn, the virus is spreading and is increasing. At least that's what I'm hearing. Again, I'm no doctor, I'm no scientist or immunologist, but relying on people that are presenting to us that this is what it will take.
Thank you. Andrew, could you speak a little bit about the childcare or that kind of opportunity provided, and also what communication you have been doing to families with little to no English?
Yeah, we have 2 bilingual employees, and so I come from a heavily bilingual district, so we anticipated that. So we've been able to overcome that. Childcare is always a problem. It's a problem when we're not in the COVID emergency. It was a problem before that. Really, the discussion amongst the chamber needs to be, Representative Dent has been trying to reform the rules and regulations for childcare providers. If you didn't know, they were collapsing statewide a year ago under the new rules because they were unable to staff them. So childcare is a nightmare right now, and it's going to be a nightmare in the fall irregardless. There just is a problem in that area. The schools, we're barely going to be able to pay our bills running regularly, so I don't know how we can afford to also run childcare. I don't understand that model. So I've always said childcare was going to be our biggest issue, not even COVID. It was going to be childcare. So
Michelle?
Sorry, no good news.
I will try to stay optimistic as well. You're my hero in that, Mike. But I think, yeah, childcare. I mean, it's one of the things in my entry planning in the community was more childcare, and they're folding left and right. So the ones that we do have in place, they can't afford to stay open. So if we were to do a phased model, it's going to be really challenging, because if you think about it, over 40% of our staff members, bus drivers, teachers, food services, they have children. So if they're having to be here every day, but students are phased, who takes care of their kids, right? So there's lots of ways that we need to look at problem solving this one. So with Mike, if we come back and our only way to come back is wearing masks, then families have to make a tough choice. Do you come back and have your child in a mask, or do you stay home and homeschool? If you have the ability to do so, and you both are in an opportunity where you can stay home and school your children, that's great, but that doesn't work for a lot of our families. So I think those are all the challenges we'll have to work around and present to families, and leave it up to families to ultimately do what's best for their own children and their family. I know in the chat box there was something about homeschool. I know our superintendents, not only here in the region but across the state, are very concerned. I was on a national panel the other day that talked exactly about this, that if families don't want to come back because of the restrictions or regulations or fear, and they go to a homeschooling model, we lose a lot of funding, and we're barely hanging on now financially. So, you know, I don't mean to sound doom and gloom. I think, like Andrew said earlier, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonades. And I always think with every problem, there's an opportunity. And we've seen so many highlights in this of opportunities for us to get better and stronger. So we'll work through it. We won't have a perfect answer that meets everybody's individual or family need, but we'll land on something that works for the betterment of all kids and families for the most part.
Well, I really appreciate that. I know we've been really in depth in these questions, and it's been really great conversation. We are at that 10-minute mark of prior to 4 o'clock. And so we usually tend to use this as an opportunity for the panelists to say some last remarks. I just sent privately to Gemma that we will have a part 2. And we will put it out there to see if Representative Dent can join us in that, so that maybe we can have some representation from the legislator of what's moving forward and how we can help that. So do know that we are in that process, and we'll provide some more information. So to give us just the last 7 minutes, you know, just out of courtesy, we'll just go ahead and have you as panelists say some last word, and we'll start with Andrew.
Yeah, I really appreciate you hosting this with Chamber, and I have a hard time reading the chat. I've gone through all the chat, and really, we're asking the community to step forward and help us open the schools back up. Be honest with you, in a safe way. We really need that, because most of us don't see in private a healthy school system with kids not in class. So I'm looking and listening to anybody and everybody to help us on that. There are models right now in the world. They're going to school right now. So really, I really appreciate this input, and I hope you guys go out and talk to 10 different parents and get to really go and chatter, because I'm convinced until Kittitas County wants to go back to school, we superintendents are powerless. Mm-hmm. We want to go back, but it's really up to the parents. So, but I do really appreciate that. I really enjoyed listening to everything, and I read as much of the chat as I could. So,
Michelle?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we're, like you as parents and community members, you're trying the best you can to navigate the uncharted territory of COVID. I don't think anybody on the screen ever, I can't judge age from names, but I'm making the assumption that none of us have actually lived through this at the level of what we're at right now. And so this is different for us. I never thought in a million years I'd be dealing with this in my life or career, but here we are. And so I just appreciate families being open and honest, and I think it takes a community to land on decisions in support of all students of the community. it's going to be a tricky balance, but I'm convinced that, you know, if we present the information, we listen to the needs, and we go on the guidance of what was presented to us, that we'll come back in the fall, and it might come back with no masks and kids skipping around in loud cafeterias at lunch. I think my hope is to get back to normal, and I think many of you here would love to just see that normal again. So we'll see. So I thank you for allowing us to be on the panel, and if you have any questions, I think Mike, Andrew, or I are always available to answer your questions.
Mike, if you can just round us out for today.
Sure. Yeah, we want to be back to school too. We want to be back fully, without masks, without restrictions. That's ideal. That's what we would like. And so we will hope that's our goal. But we do have to live with mandates. And I know there's two sides with our communities and people out there. There's those that say that, you know, masks and social distancing, and that it's ridiculous, and why do we need to do that, and kids need to be back in school. And then there's the other side that I'm not sending my kid there if nobody's going to wear a mask. And so we know that however the mandate comes down, or decisions we have to make, we're not going to make everybody happy in this situation. And so we just have to listen to our consultants and our health professionals, and we honestly really want to do what's best for kids. And that's our ultimate goal. And so that's what we will be working towards.
Well, again, I appreciate all of you for coming. And Gemma, thank you for putting this all together. We will have a part 2. I am seeing some comments in here. If you haven't seen this from a panelist standpoint, there's some discussion about special needs students that they have some questions in regard to it. And I am a parent that has a son that's just recently diagnosed with an autism spectrum. And so I understand the struggles with IEP students and students that are just struggling altogether. And then there was a request for Kittitas to have a Q&A specifically, Mike. So just for your information, it looks like there's some parents on here that would love to have a Q&A with you also.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
But we really appreciate you all three and everyone that participated today. You know, this is the mission of the Chamber, is to be a resource and information provider so that we can make the move wherever it is possible. So you will see in part 2 coming up. We'll see what we can do to confirm those to participate. But thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the day.
Thank
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.